It's not every day a shooting victim can pick up the phone and call emergency services to get help, right? It's one of those incidents that makes you stop and ask, how could this happen? How did someone who once stood in the international sports spotlight get caught up in such a tragedy? Today I want to share a story with you that at first glance seems almost unbelievable. But like life itself, it's much more complicated than it seems. Do you think it's possible that constant pressure and a persistent feeling of danger could push someone to the breaking point? Let's dive in and see. Let's begin by looking at how it all started and how a seemingly normal relationship between a student and a coach turned into a nightmare. 58-year-old Michael Barrasone had spent his entire life proudly standing among champions. But in the spring of 2022, he found himself in a courtroom in Morristown, New Jersey, where, in his eyes, he walked out defeated. In court, the once regal rider appeared as a disheveled shadow of his former self. It was one of the biggest falls from grace that the elite world of equestrian sports had ever seen. But how did a champion end up on trial? In August 2019, shots were fired at a horse farm in Long Valley, New Jersey. The shooter? Michael Barrasone. Few could have imagined that this calm, composed man could ever pull the trigger. Olympic equestrian Michael Barrasone was considered one of the best trainers in the world. He coached other Olympians and represented Team USA at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Barrasone was one of the top dressage riders, having competed at the Olympics. He trained up-and-coming riders who went on to excel in prestigious competitions. He was a well-known figure in the dressage and equestrian community, and many young riders were eager to train at his farms and with his team of coaches. The Olympic champion owned two stunning horse farms, one outside Palm Beach and another in an upscale area of New Jersey, which he named Hawthorne Hill. On this 53-acre stretch of prime horse country, there was an equestrian paradise where dozens of horses were kept. Lush, rolling green pastures, an open riding arena, and a massive, beautiful indoor ring attracted equestrians from all levels, amateurs and professionals alike. Laura Osborne, Chelsea Westra, and their horses trained under Michael Barrasone. They saw him as a strict and disciplined coach, a man who liked to keep everything under control. Horses require constant care, so Laura and Chelsea lived and worked at the stables, looking after the horses around the clock. In return, they received free riding lessons from the Olympian. A year before the tragedy, the Olympic champion had been scouting new talent at his Florida horse farm when he was approached by 37-year-old Lauren Kanarek, a woman with dreams of becoming a dressage champion. It was their shared love for horses that brought their paths together, a meeting that would forever change both of their lives. At the age of 3, Lauren first saw horses and immediately fell in love with these majestic animals that symbolize strength, freedom, and grace. From that moment, she couldn't stop thinking about horses. Like many little girls, she dreamed of having her own pony, and as she grew older, she wanted to compete professionally in the equestrian world. Lauren's father, Jonathan Kanarek, bought her her first horse when she graduated from high school, and she threw herself into her passion. By the time Lauren won her first amateur competitions, dressage superstar Michael Barrasone had already made his name in the sport. She watched him closely, mesmerized by the harmony and precision with which he performed his dressage routines. And she, too, wanted to ride with Michael and learn the same graceful, ballet-like movements of dressage. After the event, Michael approached Lauren and invited her to train at his riding club in New Jersey. Everyone knew Michael as an Olympic champion. He was a real star, so passing up on an opportunity like that would have been foolish. Lauren was on the lookout for the best trainer, and she really liked Michael Barrasone's riding club. It was an offer she couldn't refuse. However, their arrangement was unlike any other Michael had made with anyone before. Lauren started training with Michael at Hawthorne Hill. She paid him $5,000 a month for lessons, boarding her horses, and living in an apartment at his white farmhouse. Michael shared the house with his assistant trainers, Justin Harden and Mary Haskins Gray. Mary was a respected Grand Prix rider, a divorced mother of 2, and a close friend of Michael's. At first, everything seemed to be going well for Lauren, and she had high hopes for her training. After all, The little girl who once dreamed of having a pony was now a student of a dressage master. The trainers and their new student got along well. Lauren's childhood dreams had come true, and her life seemed perfect. She posted pictures on Facebook with Michael and was quite happy with her lessons. But over time, Michael began to notice that Lauren wasn't just any student. She was quite demanding. The main reason for her dissatisfaction was what she saw as inadequate training from Michael's assistants and from the Olympic champion himself. But other students had never complained about Michael Barrasone's coaching team. Still, Michael couldn't simply end his training with Lauren and tried to smooth things over by personally conducting more lessons. He was interested in the money he earned from Lauren, as bills had to be paid. Stable workers Laura Osborne and Chelsea Westra confirmed that by the summer of 2019, tensions between Michael and Lauren had resurfaced, and serious misunderstandings arose again. The conflict reignited over Lauren's expectations and the amount of attention she was receiving from Michael. It turned out that, due to his busy schedule, Michael couldn't devote all of his time to one demanding student. He passed most of the training duties to his assistants, Justin Harden and Mary Gray, but Lauren wanted to train exclusively with the Olympic champion, not his assistants. But was it part of their agreement that Lauren would only train with Michael, or was this her own personal demand? In any community, there are certain rules, and Michael Barrasone's farm was no exception. He never worked exclusively with just one client. If you trained at his farm, that meant you could be coached by Michael as well as his assistants, Justin Harden and Mary Haskins. In every sports club or facility, the head trainer is a replaceable figure, which is why a staff of trainers and assistants is kept, many of whom were once his students themselves. But that wasn't good enough for Lauren, and she became upset when Michael's full attention wasn't solely focused on her. In Mary Gray, Lauren even saw a rival. Day by day, the tension on the farm kept escalating. It felt like something terrible was about to happen at any moment. The relationship between Lauren and Mary was strained. Lauren didn't like how much time Michael was spending with Mary Gray. She wanted to be the best and didn't want anyone standing in her way. Were these two women just competing for Michael's attention as one of the best trainers in the world? The peacefulness of Hawthorne Hill was on the verge of collapse. It was a true Cold War. On July 31st, 2019, Michael Barrasone called 911 and said, "There's a war going on here, and something needs to be done. I can't take these people anymore. I need them gone. Help!" By the summer of 2019, the situation on the farm had become so intense that the trust between all parties had completely disintegrated. Social media became a major source of tension, and the conflict between Michael, Lauren, and Mary was becoming public knowledge. Lauren Kanarek was deeply upset and had no intention of tolerating what she saw as an injustice. She took to Facebook, using the platform to launch her own war. Lauren crafted a story based on a chessboard, in which Michael was the king who had been captured and killed, and Mary Gray was the queen who needed to be sacrificed to protect their castle, the farm. What started as a seemingly playful story soon turned into veiled threats. 2 weeks later, Lauren posted another message. "Anyone who keeps poking a sleeping beast will eventually face its wrath." The tension on the farm kept growing, and the relationship between them reached a breaking point. Meanwhile, Lauren continued to stoke the flames, telling her father that she was worried about the safety of her horses. She claimed she couldn't sleep at night, anxious about how they were being treated. Lauren alleged that the horses were intentionally starved and then overfed, which she believed was damaging their health. The conflict between Lauren and Michael went beyond training and drew attention to the conditions in which the animals were kept on the farm, damaging Michael Barrasone's reputation. Although the accusations of animal mistreatment were never proven and remained mere rumors, the public became divided. Some sided with Michael, believing that Lauren was intentionally destroying his life from within, while others supported Lauren. In mid-July, the situation worsened when farm employees discovered several hidden recording devices that Lauren and her boyfriend Rob had placed in the barn. Lauren was searching for any information she could use against Michael, claiming she was recording conversations out of fear of the farm staff. Lauren continued her attacks on Michael on social media, accusing him of racism, homophobia, and anti-Semitism, allegations that Michael vehemently denied, as they could have seriously harmed his career. This raises the question, if Michael wasn't guilty, why didn't he sue Lauren for defamation and cut all ties with her? Perhaps he was too shaken by everything that was happening and felt financially dependent on the money he was receiving from Lauren. This story reminds us that in today's world, reputation and careers can be destroyed in an instant. Michael Barrassone, who had once stood strong through every hardship, found himself knocked down, crushed under the pressure Lauren was putting on him. Lauren, on her part, claimed that it was the other way around. In one of her posts, she stated that Michael, with his imposing height and aggressive behavior, had bullied her, and she feared for her life. However, none of the witnesses could corroborate these accusations. Michael Barrassone was deeply disturbed by everything happening around him, both in real life and online. Farm employees noticed the rising tension and feared the worst. Michael said that living under the same roof with Lauren and her boyfriend Rob had become unbearable. He didn't feel safe in his own home. One day, Michael made the decision to ask Lauren to pack her things and leave the house with her boyfriend and their horses, but she refused and made it clear she wasn't going anywhere. At that point, Michael and Mary decided to leave the house themselves. They fled to Michael's winter home, located about 30 minutes from Palm Beach, Florida. Michael Barrassone felt like his paradise had turned into hell, and chaos had replaced control. He wasn't sleeping or eating. Meanwhile, Lauren Kanarek continued her online attacks. On the morning of August 3, 2019, at 9:35 a.m., Michael called the police again, pleading for help. "They're crazy. They're stalking us. They're stalking us." Local police responded to the farm, but they viewed it as nothing more than a landlord-tenant dispute. In desperation, Michael Barrassone posted on Facebook, "All my actions against them have been planned for months. Everything I've done to them so far has been child's play." The war was about to get much worse, but what was the final straw that pushed Michael over the edge and led him to grab a gun? On August 7th, 2019, a van pulled up to Michael Barrassone's house, and a woman stepped out, identifying herself as a social worker from New Jersey's Division of Child Protection and Permanency. During the conversation, it became clear that Lauren Kanarek had filed a complaint with SafeSport, accusing Michael Barrassone of bullying, harassment, and intimidation. Although she claimed there had been no physical violence, the social worker had come to check on Mary Gray's children, but they weren't home. The farm workers assured the social worker that Michael and Mary took excellent care of the children. But for Michael, this visit was the final blow. He started to fear that an investigation into abuse might be looming, and his mental state deteriorated rapidly. In a fit of emotion, Michael decided to put an end to the situation. He cut the meeting with the social worker short, kissed Mary, and asked her to wait outside. Then he retrieved a gun from his safe, got into his truck, and drove to the farm where Lauren and her boyfriend, Rob Goodwin, were staying. What exactly happened next is still unclear, but one thing is certain. An enraged Michael confronted Lauren at the farm and shot her twice. Hearing the gunshots, Rob rushed over and fought with Michael. At 2:13 in the afternoon, Lauren, bleeding, was able to call emergency services herself and ask for help. When the police arrived, Michael Barrassone was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of unlawful possession of a firearm, a black and pink 9mm pistol found at the scene. Lauren, critically injured and bleeding, was rushed to the hospital, while Michael, beaten by Rob, was taken into custody. Lauren was in critical condition. She underwent emergency surgery and was placed in a medically induced coma due to the risk of brain damage. She remained in the coma for 4 days and spent 3 weeks in intensive care, unable to speak because she was on a ventilator. Once her condition improved, Lauren gave her statement to the police. Lauren stated that Michael had been hiding behind some bushes near the back entrance of the house. She approached him, unaware that he had a gun. According to her, they began talking, and suddenly Michael pulled out the weapon and shot her twice. Rob Goodwin, who was nearby, claimed that Michael also fired at him but missed. Michael's defense attorneys argued that Lauren had pushed him to an emotional breaking point. and many of his fellow Olympians supported this version of events. However, after the incident, Barrisone put his horse farm up for sale, and his relationship with Mary Gray ended. Mary Gray also testified in court, confirming that the summer of 2019 had been extremely difficult for Michael. She stated that he often panicked and was tense, but that he had always treated her children with love. The Child Protection Service's investigation had found no issues within their family. Michael Barrisone spent more than 2 years in jail, and the legal battle dragged on for 3 years, finally coming to a close in March 2022. When Michael Barrisone's trial finally began, the high-profile case lasted almost 3 weeks. The courtroom became a battleground for the attorneys, but the question remained: who was the real victim? Michael Barrisone, who had repeatedly reached out to the police for help, practically shouting that he was afraid of this woman, or the fragile Lauren, who spent 4 days in a coma. "I was in a coma for 4 days, 3 weeks in intensive care, unable to speak because they had put me on a ventilator. It felt like my life had almost ended." However, during her testimony, Lauren Kanarek was asked if she had a plan to destroy Michael Barrisone, and she answered, yes. Michael Barrisone's attorneys chose a rare defense strategy. They argued that at the time of the crime, he had temporarily lost his mind and was legally insane. Barrisone himself claimed he remembered walking into his office but had no recollection of grabbing the gun or shooting Lauren. Michael's lawyer, Ed Belinkas, insisted that his client undergo an evaluation by forensic psychiatrists. Doctors Stephen Simmering and Charles Hassan interviewed Michael at length and concluded that Lauren Kanarek had subjected him to emotional manipulation known as gaslighting, which ultimately broke his psyche. They argued that Lauren had been playing with his perception of reality, pushing him to a breaking point. Gaslighting is a form of manipulation where a person is made to doubt their own sanity, memories, and perception of events. Based on this conclusion, Michael's defense used the argument of temporary insanity, a rare plea in court. The court accepted this version and found Michael Barrisone legally insane at the time of the crime, absolving him of criminal responsibility. The jury ruled that he was not accountable for his actions that day. What does "not guilty by reason of insanity" mean? It means that a person is not held responsible for their actions because, at the time of the act, they were not aware of what they were doing. Barrisone admitted to shooting Lauren, but he claimed he didn't intend to kill her, only that he wanted her to leave. After the verdict was announced, an emotional Barrisone broke down in tears and collapsed into the arms of his lawyer. His legal team called this justice, arguing that Michael was the true victim, driven to madness. If he had been found guilty, he could have faced up to 80 years in prison. But the question remains: even under stress, what could have driven him to grab a gun and shoot? Barrisone claimed he couldn't remember the actual moment of the shooting, though he recalled everything else. Dr. Louis Schlesinger expressed doubt that Barrisone experienced a psychological blackout. It's possible that Robert Goodwin, Lauren's fiancé, struck Michael on the head during their struggle, which could explain his memory lapses. However, it's important to remember that Lauren Kanarek, who was shot twice in the chest, is also a victim. This fact was somewhat overshadowed during the trial, even though many in the equestrian community rallied around Michael Barrisone and saw his actions as justified. To this day, the exact motive behind the shooting remains unclear. According to police, Michael Barrisone had been trying to evict Lauren and her fiancé from the farm, but the situation was complicated by the fact that the couple not only rented the house, but also boarded their horses on the property. The police also noted that in the week leading up to the shooting, the farm had been the subject of numerous complaints from Lauren Kanarek, who had contacted local authorities regarding rental violations. According to court documents, on August 7, 2019, around 2:45 p.m., Michael Barrisone confronted Lauren and her fiancé on the porch of the house. The conversation quickly escalated, and Barrisone shot Lauren twice in the chest. Lauren's fiancé tried to wrestle the gun away, but Barrisone managed to fire one more shot which hit a window. However, the skilled defense attorneys successfully argued that Michael Barrisone was suffering from a mental defect that made him believe he was genuinely in danger from Lauren Kanarek, and that he did not understand the consequences of his actions. The defense also claimed that Kanarek and Goodwin sicked their dog on Barrisone and even attacked him. Kanarek had been posting inflammatory remarks about Michael Barrisone on social media, portraying the former Olympic champion as someone who had lost his mind. Michael Barrisone's lawyer, Edward Belinkas, was thrilled with the verdict, but Lauren Kanarek's attorney, Bruce Nagel, called the decision a miscarriage of justice and accused Barrisone of putting on a performance for the jury. Lauren's lawyer has no intention of giving up and is determined to seek justice. He believes the court's ruling is madness and that Michael Barrisone is a criminal who should be punished to the full extent of the law. A few weeks after the verdict, Michael Barrisone was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. He was committed to the facility where he will remain until a judge determines when or if he can be released back into society. This case truly raises a lot of questions. The fact that Michael Barrisone was an Olympic champion doesn't absolve him of responsibility for his actions. The law protects property rights, and if Michael was unable to evict Lauren and chose to leave himself, it implies that she had a legal right to stay on the farm. Additionally, it's strange that he continued to collect $5,000 a month from her for training, despite his dissatisfaction. If Lauren was paying such a high sum, her expectations that she would be trained by Barrisone personally, rather than his assistants, were reasonable. After all, the fact remains, Michael almost killed someone. Following the incident, Lauren became the target of online harassment, with Barrisone's supporters saying she deserved to be shot. But let's consider her side of the story. She was paying a significant amount of money for a service that wasn't being fully delivered. She expected to train with a champion, but instead, she was being taught by assistants. Yes, her actions, taking the conflict public on social media, can be seen as toxic, and she even admitted that she wanted to damage his career. But she had the right to express her frustration, especially since she never directly mentioned his name in her posts. Now picture this. A grown man, overwhelmed by his emotions, grabs a gun and tries to kill her. This is an attempt to take a life. The question is, did Lauren truly threaten his life? She wasn't trying to harm him. A person in a healthy emotional state would have handled the situation differently, by breaking the contract, calling the police, or resolving the issue legally, but wouldn't have resorted to violence. Imagine you're dissatisfied with the service at a restaurant and file a complaint, and in response the owner tries to shoot you. It's absurd, right? This story also raises concerns about the state of society, where a woman's words can be taken as absolute truth without proper verification. We live in a world where the feeling of perceived victimization can drastically affect how situations unfold. But let's get back to this story. In November 2023, Michael Barrisone was released, though he continues to receive psychological treatment. He is now in a relationship with Laura Osborne, who used to work at the farm. Meanwhile, after numerous surgeries and recovery, Lauren Kanarek has returned to horseback riding. Think about it. Michael Barrisone, a successful, respected man, an Olympic champion whose life seemed perfect, found himself at the center of a shocking incident that turned his world upside down. Lauren Kanarek, his student, whose actions and words pushed this story toward a tragic conclusion. But was Michael truly a victim of manipulation? Or did he simply fail to control his emotions and take an irreversible step? I wonder, where is the fine line between truth and fiction, between a real threat and an imagined one? How far are we willing to go to protect our reputation or our lives? And most importantly, who is the real aggressor here? The one who threatened with words, or the one who decided to pull the trigger? We often forget that behind every story like this are real people, their emotions, fears, and inner demons. I'm struck by how unresolved conflicts can lead to catastrophic outcomes, where a single word or action can set off a chain reaction. What do you think? Was Michael Barrisone justified in defending himself? Or were his actions an extreme and unjustified reaction to the pressure he felt? Who do you think is the real victim in this story? Personally, I believe both sides bear some responsibility for how things turned out. But even so, no one has the right to take another person's life.